Hello, viewers. Welcome to the YouTube channel Lex Consilium Foundation. And it's a great pleasure to talk to an old friend, Sarosh Bana. Now, Sarosh had his education in India, Switzerland, Germany, and Hawaii. He's a journalist with over 40 years of exposure in reporting on the desk, in editing. Presently, he is the executive editor of Business India, and his interest is extending or extends to defense, security, international affairs, economy, politics, and the related issues. You would get his complete profile in the description part of this video, but I'd like to say that he's an advisor to the Wisdom Foundation that was founded in 2006 in Mumbai, and that focuses on Gandhian values of nonviolence. And there is also an NGO with which he is connected, Forum for People Oriented Water Utilization. Now, that is something which directly impacts most of the persons in India. Now, welcome to this channel, Sarosh. That we are talking about West Asia, the war that started on 20th of February, and the principal architects of that were Donald Trump, the US president, and Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, saw the attack on Iran. The objectives of that war are still obscure, though it has seen a slight pause, but still a large number of people believe that it has the potential of being converting into World War III. Now, Sarosh, I would request you to give a background and where this war stands, and then we proceed further in our discussion.
Thank you so much, Nilendra. It's a pleasure to be on your show. And it's a topic that is also quite topical as of now, because that's what the news agencies are all agog about. You know, they are rife with news about what's happening and the developments in the West Asian region. Well, I just wanted to say that at the outset, our world certainly didn't need this war. This war is completely out of place. It was not necessary to begin with. And there are, of course, questions raised as to what are the motivations behind this war? What are the reasons that compelled Israel and America to launch these attacks on 28 February against Iran? I would say at the outset that this war is patently unlawful as it violates international law. It has no sanction of the American Congress. It violates the UN Charter, and it also has no UNSC authorization. And there are no grounds for self-defense because a war is, justified under certain assumptions, and there is no ground for self-defense, and also no imminent threat to either of these warring parties, and also using military action to force a regime change is violative of a country's sovereignty, and that is again patently unlawful under international law. And a side question arises in all this, that as to why Trump has never sounded out North Korea for any preemptive strikes, because North Korea holds out much larger threats across the world. And he has actually met Kim Jong un, the dictator of North Korea, on at least 3 occasions. And he has had 3 meetings with Kim Jong un. And he has spoken very highly of Kim Jong un at a time when Kim Jong un has gone on record to say that he is developing missiles which can strike America. So it is very strange that Donald Trump has never said, but maybe because of China, because it would certainly have the entry of China if there was any kind of conflagration between the Americans and North Koreans. So that is probably a kind of a deterrent for not, as far as Iran is concerned. Iran is more or less quite isolated in the world. The Arab world, the Muslim world, does not really much to Iran's line. And that is the reason why it is it's quite a soft target as far as Americans and the Israelis are concerned. And on Sunday, on 22nd March, Trump threatened to target Iran's power plants and energy infrastructure if the Strait of Hormuz was not open within 48 hours. But then the very next day, on Monday, the 23rd March, he said that the US and Iran had held talks and he wouldn't be targeting Strait of Hormuz. Of course, that was denied by Iran right away, as we did also in India. We had denied that Trump had intervened in Operation Sindoor, and Trump kept on harping on that same theme that he was the one instrumental in making sure that India and Pakistan de-escalated from the war situation in Operation Sindoor. So Trump has gone on record umpteen times in the past, making all kinds of bravado statements, and they have amounted to just about nothing. Now, one thing is that who are these two men who have gone to war against one man? Essentially, it was two men's war against one man. It was Netanyahu who actually instigated Trump to start the attacks against, and it was all for targeting Ayatollah Khomeini, the supreme leader of Iran. He was demonized, he was seen as a demon, rightly or wrongly, that's for another time. That is the reason why the basic reason for the war was Ayatollah. As far as Israel and America are concerned, they were very concerned about the nuclear program of Iran. And they were also very concerned about, or at least they expressed concern about the ballistic missile program of Iran. And they were also expressing, of course, concern about the despotic regime, the theocratic regime that was actually crushing the public of Iran over the past 47 years and not allowing freedom, civil rights, and so on. And basically, they had these motivations for going to war. But the funny thing is, Israel and America themselves are nuclear powers. I mean, that's known by everyone. And America sits on a stockpile of over 5,000 nuclear warheads. Israel, funnily, is a nuclear power, and it has denied all along that it is having any kind of nuclear potential. It has been known that Israel has at least 90 nuclear warheads. Two nuclear powers. Israel has not even signed the nuclear non-proliferation treaty. It is pointing fingers at Iran. Under the Barack Obama deal, the JCPOA, it had submitted itself to IAEA safeguards. Iran was submitting itself to IAEA safeguards. And IAEA was that time very, very sure that Iran was not pursuing any military nuclear activity. Trump changed that entire scenario by coming and had this JCPOA was entered into in 2015. In 2018, Trump revoked this agreement unilaterally and left Iran with no choice because Iran was out of the agreement and it had no compulsions, no obligations whatsoever to submit itself to IAEA safeguards and monitoring. That's a strange thing that Trump himself led Iran down the path of military nuclearization. And now he's professing to go to war, dilute the Iranian nuclear facilities, which he himself, in a way, encouraged.
So it is absolutely clear that there is no justification. There's no justification for US or Israel for this war, and this cannot be justified under the international law. That is quite
Ex-
apparent. But now that the war is there, what do you think is the potential risks and threats that emanate from this war for India?
Well, I would just like to complete what I was saying. For
Yes,
instance, when Israel and America launched their strikes against Iran,
yes.
they had very, very solid intelligence to back up their ability to strike because apparently they were going to be striking later in the day on 28th February. But they advanced it to the morning because they were tipped off that the Ayatollah and the entire top hierarchy of Iran were going to be holding a meeting at a particular venue in Tehran. When they struck with multiple missiles on Iran. And what they got as a result was jam. They got far more than what they anticipated. They not only assassinated the Ayatollah, the supreme leader whom they wanted to eliminate, but they also eliminated 47 others of the top hierarchy from of Iran. I would assume that that was the stage when Iran or when Israel and America would have said, we have achieved far more than what we bargained for by starting this war. So we will now stop the war and we will start negotiating with Iran that if they don't fall in line, if they don't come back to democracy, withdraw the theocracy, the religion, the separate religion from the state, then we will be forced to continue our conflict, military action. They should have given a chance to the Iranians to come to the negotiation table instead of going whole hog into this. Surely Israel and America knew what the consequences would be of the strikes on Iran. Iran is not Venezuela. It's not going to be sitting quiet and idle. There were absolutely clear evidence that Iran would be striking back and striking back with a vengeance and striking back across the Gulf region where the American bases were. Actually said so a week earlier before the strikes that if we are going to be attacked, we will attack all the American installations in the Gulf. So this was very clear. And basically, the spin offs of this entire dispute were there for everyone to see. If the writing was on the wall, that it will be absolutely disastrous for the world economy. It will be disastrous for the world in general, the social order in general. And that is what we are seeing now, what is happening around us. So Americans and the Israelis were absolutely going out of reach, in this entire thing. Another thing is, I'm surprised that the American public and the Israeli public have not swarmed the streets in protest against this war. Israelis did protest against the war in Gaza. But as far as is concerned, the Israelis are solidly backing Netanyahu because Iran has been demonized over the years and so on. So the Israelis feel that they are justified in launching this war against. But America was not in the sights, the radar of Iran. And there was absolutely no reason. Israel also has been in a long drawn conflict with Gaza. The Hamas had killed 1,195 people on 7th of October 2023. And in retaliation, Israel butchered 73,000 Gazans and Palestinians over the last 3-4 years. And a lot of them were children, school going children, babies, and infants and women. And that there was a huge amount of destruction. Entire Gaza has been destroyed. So Israel was war weary. It is amazing that a country that had just spent so many years on a war, which should not have happened to that degree, to that level, has chosen to go to war once again. Israel spent $67 billion on the war in Gaza. It has already spent something like $7 billion in the first 20 days in its war on Iran. America has already spent some billions in its war on Iran, and the Pentagon has asked for $200 billion more for continuing the war. Now, this is absolutely uncalled for because the entire world is war weary and certainly doesn't need a war at this stage because there have been the scars of COVID and the war of Ukraine and the war of Israel are very much there in the air. War right now is completely uncalled for. Yes,
How
you
long,
were
how
asking
long
about
can the
India.
how long can the two economies afford to continue with the war?
Well, that's a question. That's an open question. But the thing is that both the countries are warmongers, Israel and America. And Israel's economy was very, very harmed, very much harmed by its war with in Gaza. public will be paying for it. It's mentioned that it will be having a toll of some $400 billion on the economy over the next many years in Israel. I mean, that is open to speculation, but it is going to be having a very, very severe impact. Israel, of course, will be having a more severe impact than America will, because America, of course, is the largest economy in the world, and it is known to be a defense superpower and so on, military superpower. So America can probably sustain a war. Donald Trump has said that we can be in this war with Iran forever. So it's there for everyone to see.
Now, how do you see the militarization of the Indian Ocean region and the possible risks, threats, and challenges for India?
The American nuclear submarine from Hawaii, actually, from the Pearl Harbor base in Hawaii. It's based over there. It came halfway across the world to torpedo with a heavy torpedo, Iranian frigate, IRIS Dana, which had just participated in the International Fleet Review in India on the eastern
It's on
seaboard.
its way back.
And it was on its way back. It was participating in the International Fleet Review and the Milan exercises, multilateral exercises. Normally, all warships which come for such multilateral exercises, they come with designated military munitions on board, and they expend those munitions once those exercises are over. So basically, these warships that take part in such exercises are unarmed after following the exercises.
Yes.
So the attack was on an unarmed Iranian frigate. Now, that was in the economic zone of Sri Lanka, which is still on the continental shelf of India. India, we are not quite sure whether it was aware of submarine lurking in its waters and the intent of the submarine. It is possible that India was probably tracking this submarine and was also aware of what was going to happen and so on. But that is open to surmise. I wouldn't want to go into that. India didn't really make any kind of statement on this attack on the submarine in its own waters. It was a very, very major humiliation for India. A neutral country's a warship that had taken part in its own fleet exercises, where even the Americans had taken part in the same exercise. That ship was attacked without any warning in its own waters, in a neutral zone. India didn't have a word to say about this entire episode. 87 Iranian sailors on board, of the 180 on board, died. India didn't have a word to say about this entire.
Yes, that's apparent. But how do you see now this militarization, as I said, in the IOR and the what should India do as regards its theater commands are concerned and the jointness of the three services?
I would say that India, like the rest of the international community, will really be bearing the brunt and will be bearing the brunt over, I don't know how many years, but it will be a long drawn difficulty that we will be facing, because basically there are quite a few issues as far as India regarding the Gulf countries. As far as India is concerned, that disrupts the Strait of Hormuz, can affect or disable its oil and gas imports. India imports 90% of its fuel requirements, and half of that comes from the Gulf region. If the Strait of Hormuz is, I mean, it has been happening, it is just as well that the Iranians have permitted some Indian ships to pass through, or ships headed for India to pass through. At the same time, we are seeing the consequences of what is happening in the Strait of Hormuz, because the LPG quota is getting much, much lower. It's affecting everyone across the board, the commercial establishments, restaurants, hotels, and the domestic households. So how long this will go on? Cylinders have gases being sold in the black, as you well know, and things are spiraling out of control. The global crude prices benchmark has risen from $73 a billion dollars at $73 a barrel before the war to $110 billion, $110 a barrel. And the Indian markets have been affected violently. From 82,000, they have crashed to less than 74,000 over this last 1 month of the conflict. The rupee has been battered severely. It was 91 rupees 8 paisa before the war began. It is now 93 rupees 90 paisa, and one doesn't know where it will be going. So India has been bearing the brunt in more ways than one. We are going to be seeing a lot more consequences. Apart from the oil and gas that we are talking about, the another part of it is the fertilizers. A lot of the fertilizers, urea and DAP, come from the Gulf, and we also use a lot of the oil in the manufacture of urea, in the manufacture of fertilizers. So any shortfall in fertilizers directly affects agriculture in India. Any direct effect on agriculture, of course, has a telling sign on our food, on our food
There is
resources.
one more aspect, Sarosh, I would like to comment. And
Yes.
this was right in the beginning on 28th February and thereafter. US talked about regime change in Iran. Now, proceeding from that, we are aware if we come to close to India that in Nepal, in Myanmar, we have seen new governments coming into power. There are problems in Sri Lanka. Bangladesh has seen a new government. President Trump has repeatedly asserted that it was he who brought in the ceasefire after Sindoor. Now, in this perspective, do you think increasing influence and interference by US in South Asia and particularly in India too?
Well, we have seen that Trump has been dictating many of the policies in India. Basically, the FTA that Trump spoke about, Trump was the one who announced the FTA, the free trade agreement with India. That is very strange. It doesn't happen that way. So it was the strangest unilateral, bilateral free trade agreement between two countries because Trump, in essence, Trump told India what America will export to India, and Trump told India what India will export to America. So it was as absurd as that, you know. So we have been accepting what Trump has been dishing out. Our entire budget has been colored by Trump's policies. Our policy, our move to bring down the GST was dictated by Trump. I mean, not he didn't directly tell us to bring down the GST, but because of the happenings around us, as far as the American tariffs were concerned, we felt we have been talking about bringing down the GST for umpteen years, and suddenly we decided to bring it down now, saying that we are doing it for the sake of the public in India, but we actually did it because of Trump's policies, which were having a fallout on our economy in a very big. That I
Yes.
would just like implications the Gulf region has. You should also realize that the GCC countries, the Gulf Cooperation Council countries, Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Kuwait and others, they have 10 million expatriates from India settled over there. So we have a huge presence of Indians in the Gulf. If there is any destabilization in the Gulf economy, it is going to be having a direct effect on Indian economy because the 10 million Indians settled in the Gulf, $50 billion every year to India. Now, if that is affected, it is going to be harmful to India and also in its own way.
Finally, I would want your reaction that having regard to the situation in West Asia, do you anticipate any disturbances, disquiet on India's international borders and the line of control?
See, the thing is that this would have been the case if Trump had walked into Greenland or Trump had walked into Cuba. That would have emboldened China So people have been talking about Chinese designs on Taiwan when such a situation arises. I would imagine China would be emboldened to really cross the line as far as India is concerned, rather than Taiwan. India is just across the border for China. China has already been violating our LOC countless times on countless occasions. It has violated it very severely across the entire border region. And it has even made establishments. So it has establishments, established bases and things like that. Xi Jinping, the president of China, has also been quite disposed against India and the Indian government. One would recall the time when Xi Jinping was visiting India for the first time after the Modi government came to power in 2014 September. Xi Jinping was visiting India and meeting Modi in Ahmedabad when 1,000 PLA troops invaded eastern Ladakh and they came with cranes and bulldozers and constructed a road in eastern Ladakh. That was a complete snub by Xi Jinping to Modi at a time when we were talking in terms of developing ties with China and so on. Xi Jinping has always been towing a hard line as far as India is concerned. So I would assume that not this war, but any other step like Greenland or Cuba or even Canada for that matter, if that is the case, then China would say that if Trump can get away with all this, then we are more than justified in walking into Arunachal Pradesh, which is anyway belonging to us. China has always been claiming that Arunachal Pradesh, which it calls Xinjiang or South Tibet, is part of China. I have a feeling that that might be a danger as far as India is concerned.
You spoke about Beijing. Fine. Now I have another question that a field marshal next door is wanting, he is very keen to play the role of a mediator as far as the warring sides are concerned in West Asia. How do you see that development from Indian military eyes?
Well, today itself, we have found that America has reached out to Iran via Pakistan. And Trump has sent a 15-point kind of an agenda for peace negotiations with Iran via Pakistan. And he chose Pakistan to be the mediator. So that really speaks volumes about how America sees Pakistan as of now, and how America sees the Pakistan as a partner in peacemaking as far as the Gulf War is concerned. Pakistan has risen in stature. You are mentioning about a field marshal who has already had a private lunch with Trump at the White House. No other military chief of any country, including NATO countries, has had that kind of a privilege to share a dining table with Trump. So the equations are, as far as, see, one should realize that Trump is a very, very megalomaniacal leader. A lot of his policies, a lot of his measures are driven not by national interests, but by his own ego. And he wants to go down in history as the most mercurial leader, as the most powerful leader on earth, who has had a lasting impact on the global economy and on the international community in modern times. Only probably I would say Hitler had that kind of an impact. But we are seeing Trump having that impact today, 70 years after the World War. We are seeing Trump having that same kind of an impact on the international community, maybe probably much larger, in quantum times, much larger than Hitler did. And we will be seeing the consequences for a long, long time about Trump behaving like this. So Trump's whimsical attitude can swing anyway. He is unpredictable, and when he was voting for the Peace Prize, Nobel Peace Prize, he was saying that if I get the Nobel Peace Prize, I'm very a strong deserver of the Nobel Peace Prize. and I will make sure that I will stop all the wars in the world. When he lost out on the Nobel Peace Prize, he turned around and said, now I am not obliged to be a peacemaker anywhere. I can go to war whenever I want. You should also recall the time in 2018 that Trump had been subjected to cognitive tests because people were talking about a mental imbalance as far as the American president was concerned. So we have a person like that, who is leading the war against Iran. We have a person like Netanyahu leading the war against Iran. Netanyahu is right now, he is held culpable for genocide and for humanitarian disregard by the International Criminal Court. And he also is facing severe charges back home. He is charged with bribery, with breach of trust, and with a couple of other things, as far as the Israeli courts are concerned. And he has requested the judiciary to postpone the hearings against him till all his battles are over. We are having these two people. The world had a very high regard for Israel. Let me just make that as a disclaimer that people had a high regard for Israel. But Netanyahu has spoiled that image irreversibly.
Thank you very much, Sarosh. And I would advise my viewers to stay with us in coming days. Again, we would be talking to Sarosh, his views, his vision of matters in West Asia. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nirendra. It was a real pleasure.